Hello, and a huge welcome to the channel. If you're looking for cross-dressing stories that are emotional, intriguing, and truly empowering, you've come to the right place.
The first thing that hit me was the headache. It wasn't your run-of-the-mill. I had one too many beers last night. Headache. I know, this was a full-blown jackhammer drilling into my skull kind of migraine. My eyelids felt like they were glued shut with cement. I groaned, rolling over. And that's when the second thing hit me. Something moved. On my chest. Too soft, heavy, and distinctly not mine something shifted with a momentum all their own. My own pecs were hard, a solid shelf of muscle I'd spent years building. This was different. This was wobbly. My eyes shot open. The world was a blurry mess, but the feeling was undeniable, a bizarre weight. A foreign pressure against the faded cotton of my old college t-shirt. My breath hitched, catching in my throat like I'd just sprinted a marathon. Holy shit, I have tits! The words tore out of my mouth in a strangled whisper. A voice that sounded vaguely like mine, but higher, tighter. Panic, cold and sharp, speared through the fog of my headache. I bolted upright in bed, my heart thundering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked down. There. Stretching the fabric of my state university football tee to its absolute limit, were two soft, round, unmistakable curves. They weren't small, either. They were significant. My six-pack, the one I did 300 crunches a day to maintain, was gone. In its place was a softer, flatter stomach that curved elegantly into hips I definitely didn't own yesterday. My mind refused to process it. It was a dream, a nightmare. It had to be. I scrambled out of bed, my legs getting hopelessly tangled in the cheap polyester sheets. My coordination was shot. My center of gravity felt all wrong instead of landing on my feet. I pitched forward, my limbs flailing like a cartoon character slipping on a banana peel. I didn't even have time to put my hands out before my face met the full-length mirror on my closet door with a dull, sickening thud. I groaned, sliding down to the floor, my new headache now competing with the old one. I pushed myself up, my hands braced against the cool glass, and finally looked. The person staring back at me was not Jake Carter. Jake Carter had short, dirty blonde hair that always stuck up, a square jaw that was perpetually covered in a 2-day scruff, and blue eyes that were. According to my ex-girlfriend Sarah, unimaginative, the person in the mirror was a woman. A woman with wild, shoulder-length auburn hair that cascaded around a heart-shaped face. A woman with wide, terrified hazel eyes. A woman with full lips, a small, slightly upturned nose, and a body that belonged on a Victoria's Secret runway. She was tall, slender but curvy in all the places society seemed to have decided a woman should be curvy, and she was wearing my t-shirt. I opened my mouth to scream, but the reflection did. I raised a hand to my face, my fingers trembling, and her hand rose to match. The skin was soft, the fingers long and delicate, the nails perfectly shaped and clean, not my calloused, slightly grimy hands that were used to gripping barbells and basketballs. No, I whispered, the sound fragile in the quiet room. No fucking way. My gaze, against my will, drifted downward, past the shocking curves of my new chest, past the unfamiliar slimness of my waist. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, followed the same path. It shot downward, fumbling with the waistband of my boxer shorts. It found nothing, just empty space. A smooth, terrifying, devastating void where the cornerstone of my entire identity used to be. The scream that had been building in my throat finally escaped, Bon. It wasn't a manly roar of frustration, it was a high, piercing shriek of pure, unadulterated horror. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, her feet, and landed hard on the floor, crab walking away from the mirror as if the reflection itself was a monster. I was hyperventilating, my lungs refusing to take in enough air. My world had been turned upside down, inside out, and shaken like a snow globe. What was happening? Was I dead? Was this hell? Was I having the most vivid, most psychologically scarring dream in human history? Business tea. The sound from my nightstand was so normal, so mundane, that it cut through my panic like a knife. My phone, I crawled over to it, my new, longer limbs feeling clumsy and awkward. The screen was lit up. A text from the group chat. Gym rats. It was from Mike. Dude, you dead. We're outside for pickup basketball. 5 mins or we leave without you. Basketball, the guys, Mike and Ryan, my stomach, my new weirdly tucked in stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. The normal, everyday reality of that text message crashed head-on with the insane, impossible reality of my current situation. I looked down at the soft, undeniable swell of my chest. I glanced back at the phone, at the message from my best friends waiting to play a game that my current body had zero chance of playing. How the hell? I muttered, my voice cracking with despair. Am I supposed to explain this? My first instinct was to hide, to lock the door, pull the blinds, and curl up in a ball until this nightmare ended. But the persistent honk of a car horn from the street told me that wasn't an option. The gym rats were not known for their patience. If I didn't show my face, they'd be breaking down my door in 10 minutes, convinced I'd been crushed under a fallen dumbbell rack. Okay, Jake, think. I told myself, my voice still sounding alien. Except I wasn't Jake anymore. I was this woman. My brain felt like a computer with 50 tabs open, all of them playing screaming goat videos. I had to get dressed. I couldn't face them in a t-shirt and boxers. My eyes scanned the room. My closet was full of my clothes, baggy jeans, hoodies, workout shorts. I grabbed the nearest pair of jeans, my favorite ones, worn soft and faded. I yanked them on, but they stopped dead at my thighs. I grunted, trying to pull them up further, but it was no use. My new hips were an immovable obstacle. The denim strained, threatening to rip. It was like trying to fit a watermelon into a Pringles can. Defeated, I tossed them aside. What about boxers? I was still wearing a pair. But they felt wrong, unsupportive, weirdly baggy in one area and tight in others. I shuddered. I couldn't think about that. My eyes landed on a cardboard box in the corner, half taped shut. The word Sarah was scrawled on the side in black marker. My ex, she'd left a box of stuff here after our messy breakup 6 months ago, and I'd just never gotten around to throwing it out. Procrastination, for the first time in my life, might actually be my savior. I scrambled over and ripped the tape off. Inside was a collection of forgotten artifacts from our relationship, a couple of paperback books. A framed photo of us at the beach. I quickly turned that face down. And a jumble of clothes. A floral sundress, a pair of yoga pants, and a bra. It was a lacy, black thing with more straps and hooks than a piece of rock climbing equipment. It looked like a miniature torture device. But I had to do something about the situation. These things were moving around with a mind of their own. It was distracting and deeply unsettling. All right, I mumbled. How hard can this be? The answer, it turned out, was very, very hard. I tried putting it on forward, but I couldn't reach the little hooks in the back. My shoulders didn't bend that way. I felt a surge of frustration. This was a conspiracy. I spun it around, fastening the hooks in the front where I could see them. It took me 5 tries to get the tiny hook and eye clasps to line up. My fingers, used to gripping heavy weights, felt like clumsy sausages. Finally, I got it hooked. I triumphantly spun it around my torso, the lace scratching against my skin. Now for the straps. I pulled them up over my shoulders and then tried to scoop myself into the cups. It was the most awkward, humiliating thing I had ever done. The underwire, a stiff, unyielding piece of metal, dug into my ribs like a dull knife. The straps bit into my shoulders, already feeling too tight. I felt like I was being slowly squeezed by a deceptively delicate python. This is insane, I gritted out, adjusting a strap. Women do this every day voluntarily. Next, I found a pair of tiny silk shorts. They looked like they were made for a child. I held them up. They were basically just 2 small triangles of fabric held together by string. You've got to be kidding me, I said to the empty room. But they were the only bottoms in the box besides the yoga pants, which seemed even more form-fitting and intimidating. I slipped them on. My legs felt incredibly long and bare. A light breeze from the open window gave me goosebumps all over. It felt like I was walking around in my underwear. I felt naked, exposed. The internal rant began, a furious monologue in my head. How do women walk around in these things without feeling like everyone in a 5-mile radius is staring at their ass? Is this a fashion statement or a cry for help? The car horn blared again, more insistent this time. Crap. I still needed a shirt. My own t-shirt was now stretched out and had a weird silhouette. I rummaged through the box again and found a simple gray V-neck tee. It was soft. I pulled it on. It fit perfectly. Hugging the curves I was still trying to forget I had. It was comfortable. Frighteningly comfortable. My hair was a disaster. A tangled auburn cloud. I ran my fingers through it, wincing as I hit snags. No time for that. What about makeup? Sarah had a little bag in the box. I unzipped it. It was a terrifying arsenal of powders, pencils, and strange little brushes. I grabbed what I thought was an eyeliner pencil. I remembered watching Sarah do this. She'd make it look so easy, a quick, elegant flick of the wrist. I leaned into the mirror, held my breath, and tried to draw a line so my hand shook. The pencil skidded, creating a thick, jagged black line that started halfway across my eyelid and ended somewhere near my eyebrow. I looked like a drunk Picasso had tried to draw a cat. Nope, I said, rubbing at it frantically. It just smeared, creating a grayish, raccoon-like smudge around my eye. I tried to fix it by doing the other eye. It ended up even worse. Then I saw the lipstick, a bright fire engine red. Maybe this will distract from the eyes, I reasoned, my logic now completely fried by panic. I twisted the tube and swiped it across my lips. I missed. A lot. The red went above my lip line, below it, and somehow. I even got a smear on my chin. I looked in the mirror, the wild hair, the raccoon eyes, the smeared lipstick. I looked like a horror movie clown who had just lost a fight with a Sharpie. I scrubbed my face with the hem of the shirt, managing to get most of the makeup off, leaving behind angry red patches on my soft new skin. Honk honk! I'm coming, I yelled, my voice cracking into a squeak. I took one last look in the mirror. A terrified woman in ill-fitting clothes stared back at me. This was it. I had to face them. But I couldn't be Jake. So, who was I? My mind raced, grasping for a lie. A cousin. Yeah, a cousin. From out of state? Somewhere boring. Ohio, I whispered. I'm his cousin. From Ohio. I practiced a higher voice. Hi, I'm Jessica. It sounded like a frog being strangled. I tried again. Hey, guys, Jake's not here? Better, but still terrible. There was a loud bang on the door. Carter, open up. We know you're in there. We can smell the protein powder. That was Ryan. My heart hammered against the cage of my bra. I took a deep, shuddering breath that was constricted by the underwire. I walked to the door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. My hand, slick with sweat, rested on the doorknob. This was quite possibly the most insane moment of my life. I turned the lock, pulled the door open just a crack, and peeked out. Mike and Ryan were standing on my doorstep, dressed in basketball shorts and jerseys. Mike, the human golden retriever of our group, was bouncing a basketball impatiently. Ryan, my best friend since freshman year, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, with a skeptical look on his face. Hi? I chirped, my voice coming out at a pitch I didn't know I was capable of. It was awful. Mike stopped bouncing the ball. His jaw went slack. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my chest, then my legs in those ridiculous shorts. A slow, dopey grin spread across his face. Whoa, he said. Hello, Jake didn't tell us he had company. Ryan didn't smile. His eyes narrowed, studying my face with an unnerving intensity. He's, not here, I squeaked, trying to sound breezy. He had to, run an errand for his mom. Lame, so lame. An errand, Ryan said, his voice flat. He never runs errands. especially not when basketball is involved. Well, it was an emergency errand, I insisted, my voice getting higher with panic. A pet emergency. His mom's cat. It ate a rubber band. Mike wasn't listening. He was still staring. So, who are you? He asked, his grin widening. I'm Mike. I'm Jessica, I said, trying to remember the script I'd prepared. I'm Jake's cousin, from Ohio, just visiting. Jessica from Ohio, Mike repeated, practically purring. He took a step closer. Damn, 'cause you and Jake could be twins. Well, almost, he winked, a gesture so cheesy it was almost impressive. I had to physically restrain myself from slamming the door in his face. Instead, I gave a tight, awkward smile that probably looked more like a pained grimace. Inside my head, I was screaming. A long, unending torrent of profanity was echoing off the walls of my skull. This is a nightmare. Mike is hitting on me. He is hitting on Jake. Ryan, thank God, seemed immune to my newfound charms. He was still studying me, his brow furrowed. Ohio, huh? Funny, Jake's never mentioned a cousin named Jessica. We're not that close, I said, a little too quickly. Distant cousins, second cousins, twice removed, dead size on his mother's side. I was just spewing genealogical nonsense. Ryan tilted his head. You know his Steam password, right? He asked, his question coming out of left field. New fantasy RPG just dropped. He was supposed to preload it last night. I want to see if the graphics are as good as they say. My blood ran cold. Of course, I knew his Steam password. It was gymrats4life/schmont123. Pathetic, I know. But if Jessica, the distant cousin from Ohio, knew it, the whole flimsy charade would collapse. Oh, no, I stammered, trying to look confused. Why would I know his video game password? That's like super personal. Ryan's eyes didn't leave my face. It felt like he was trying to x-ray my very soul. He knew something was off. He might not know what, but he knew this wasn't right. Right, he said slowly, drawing the word out. Mike, oblivious, clapped him on the shoulder. Dude, leave the hot cousin alone, we'll check out the game later. He turned his high-wattage smile back on me. So, Jessica, how long are you in town for? Maybe I could show you around. We could grab a bite. I know this great place that does killer buffalo wings. He was asking me on a date. Mike, who I'd once seen eat an entire pizza by himself as a post-workout meal, was asking me out for wings. The sheer absurdity of it was making me dizzy. I was enduring the kind of crude, transparent flirting that we, as a group, would normally mock for weeks. And I was the target. The internal screaming intensified. I don't know how long I'm staying, I managed. It's all very up in the air. Well, Mike said, leaning against the door frame now, trying to look casual. Tell Jake we stopped by. And tell him his cousin is way, way better looking than he is. He winked again. I think a small part of my soul shriveled up and died. Will do, I chirped, my fake smile plastered on so hard my face ached. Come on, man, let's go, Ryan said. Tugging on Mike's arm, he gave me one last, long, searching look before letting Mike pull him away. Nice meeting you, Jessica. The way he said my fake name made it sound like an accusation. I watched them jog down the driveway and pile into Mike's beat-up sedan. As they drove off, Mike honked the horn twice and gave me a final, exaggerated wave from the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the silent apartment. I leaned my back against it, my legs giving out. I slid down to the floor, my head in my hands. I had survived. Barely. But the ordeal had left me shaking. The worst part wasn't the lie, or the fear of being discovered. It was the look in Mike's eyes, the way he'd looked at me like I was a piece of meat, the way Ryan had looked at me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. I was trapped in a body that wasn't mine, being hit on by my own friend, and lying to the one person I trusted most in the world. I stayed there on the floor for a long time. The only sound in the room, the frantic beating of my new very confused heart. After the adrenaline from my encounter with the guys wore off, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion set in. I was still on the floor, the cold wood a stark contrast to my strangely warm skin. I felt a desperate need for answers. This couldn't just be random. There had to be a reason, a cause, some kind of cosmic joke I wasn't in on. I pushed myself up, my joints feeling loose and strange, and stumbled over to my laptop on the desk. Maybe I'd been drugged. Maybe someone had played an incredibly elaborate and illegal prank on me. I opened the browser, my fingers fumbling on the keys. What do you even Google for this woke up as a woman help? Sudden gender swap symptoms? As the homepage loaded, a notification popped up from my email client. One new message. The sender was listed as the admins at brocode.org. My blood went cold. Brocode. We joked about the bro code all the time. It was our dumb, unwritten set of rules for friendship. Don't date a friend's ex. Don't leave a bro behind at a party. Don't be the last one to buy around. It was stupid, but it was our thing. With a trembling hand, I clicked the message. The subject line was chillingly direct. The body of the email was short, simple, and utterly terrifying. Bro code. Article 2, Section B, violation number 7. Never ditch a bro for a girl, especially on game night. Defendant Jake Carter. Incident date 6 months ago. Details: defendant bailed on annual Lord of the Rings movie marathon with Ryan and Mike to have a serious talk with then-girlfriend. Sarah. Penalty: walk a mile in her shoes. Literally. The sentence is to be served until the lesson is understood. Sincerely, the management. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. My mind reeled back 6 months. The Lord of the Rings marathon. I remembered, it was our sacred yearly tradition. The extended editions, a mountain of junk food, 3 grown men quoting Gandalf for 12 straight hours. But Sarah and I had been fighting constantly. She'd given me an ultimatum that night. We either talk this out now, Jake, or we're done. I had called Ryan and made up some lame excuse about a family dinner. I chose her, and she broke up with me anyway. I ditched my friends for nothing. You have got to be kidding me, I whispered to the screen. This was my punishment. A mystical, karmic sentence handed down by some non-existent cosmic fraternity. It was the most ridiculous, most insane explanation imaginable. And yet, it was the only one I had. It fit, the timing, the nature of the transformation. Walk a mile in her shoes. A wave of helplessness washed over me. Until the lesson is understood, what lesson? That I was a crappy friend, I already knew that. How was I supposed to prove I'd understood it? Was there an appeal process? A celestial court I could file a motion with? My stomach growled. A loud, surprisingly dainty rumble. I hadn't eaten anything. The thought of facing the outside world was terrifying. But starvation was a more immediate threat. I had to go to the grocery store. This meant a whole new set of preparations. First, the shoe situation. I looked in Sarah's box again. There were 2 options, a pair of strappy, 4-inch stilettos that looked like an ankle-shattering lawsuit waiting to happen, or a pair of simple flat sandals. The choice was obvious. I slipped on the sandals. My feet felt incredibly vulnerable. I grabbed the gray V-neck and the horrifyingly short silk shorts. I couldn't go out in those. No way. I rummaged deeper in the box and, thank God, I found them a pair of black leggings. They were still tight, still felt weirdly revealing, but at least they covered my entire leg. I pulled them on, the stretchy fabric clinging to every new curve. It felt like wearing a second skin. I took a deep breath and grabbed my keys and wallet. I opened the door and stepped outside. The sunlight felt brighter, the air sharper. The first thing I noticed was the change in my walk. I couldn't just lumber along like I used to. My body wanted to move differently, and there was an automatic, gentle sway in my hips that I wasn't consciously creating. It was mesmerizing and deeply weird. I felt like I was piloting a high-performance vehicle I had no training for. The short walk to the corner store, a walk I'd made 1,000 times, felt like crossing a hostile foreign country. Every sound was magnified. Every passing car seemed to slow down. I was acutely aware of being looked at. Or maybe I just felt like I was being looked at. My old self, Jake, moved through the world with a sort of blunt invisibility. I was just another guy. But this body was a magnet for attention. As I was waiting at the crosswalk, a pickup truck slowed down beside me. A guy with a greasy ponytail and a stained shirt leaned out the passenger window. "Hey, sweetheart, looking good today," he yelled, his voice slimy. He made a kissing noise. I froze. My entire body went rigid. I'd heard guys yell stuff at women from cars before. I'd probably laughed at it with my friends, dismissing it as dumb but harmless. It wasn't harmless. It was paralyzing. It made my skin crawl. It felt violating, like his eyes were physically touching me, stripping me down. I felt a hot flash of rage mixed with a cold spike of fear. I wanted to yell back, to tell him where he could shove his disgusting comments. But the voice that came to mind was Jake's, a deep, angry bark. The body I was in felt small, vulnerable. The guy was bigger than me, bigger than the old me. What would he do if I yelled back? So I did nothing. I stared straight ahead, my jaw clenched, my hands balled into fists, and I waited for the light to change. The truck peeled out, laughing. I felt disgusting, humiliated, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of understanding, a dark, ugly glimpse into a reality I had never, ever had to consider before. By the time I got to the store, my nerves were shot. I grabbed a basket and moved through the aisles on autopilot. Keeping my head down, I bought milk, bread, eggs, and a large, economy-sized bottle of ibuprofen. As I stood in the checkout line, I caught my reflection in the security monitor above the register. The auburn hair, the wide hazel eyes, the leggings clinging to my legs. It was still a shock, but the raw horror was starting to be replaced by a weary, bewildered acceptance. This was me, for now. On the walk home, I made a detour. I went to a pharmacy. My 5 o'clock shadow usually started to show up around, 5 o'clock. I didn't know if that biological clock was still ticking, but the idea of stubble sprouting on this smooth, feminine face was a horror I wasn't prepared to face. In the women's grooming aisle, I was confronted by a wall of pink and purple plastic, razors with names like Silk Embrace and Venus Swirl. They had 5 blades, moisturizing strips, and ergonomic handles. They looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. My old razor was a single-blade disposable piece of junk I bought in a 20-pack. I grabbed a pink razor that promised a flawlessly smooth finish and a can of raspberry-scented shaving gel. The cashier, a teenage girl with braces, gave me a bored look as she scanned my items. I paid in cash, my hands still shaking slightly. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, emotionally drained. The lesson, whatever it was already proving to be brutal. Later that evening, I decided to face the shaving ordeal. It seemed like a necessary step in maintaining my cover. I locked myself in the bathroom, stripped off the leggings, and stared at my legs, my long, pale, unfamiliar legs. They were covered in a fine, light brown dusting of hair, the same as my old legs. It was one of the few things that still felt like a part of me. I sat on the edge of the tub, sprayed the pink, foamy gel onto my calf, and took the first swipe with the futuristic-looking razor. It glided over my skin with terrifying ease. I expected resistance, a familiar scrape. There was none, just a silent, smooth path of pale skin left in its wake. It took me forever. The angles were all wrong, propping my leg up on the toilet, trying to reach the back of my knee, contorting myself to get my ankle without slicing it open. I was used to a quick, 2-minute shave of my face. This was an athletic event. I nicked myself 3 times, little beads of red blooming against the white foam. The raspberry scent was cloying, filling the small bathroom. When I was finally done, I rinsed my legs off. They were incredible, impossibly smooth. I ran my hand up my calf, and the sensation was so foreign, so utterly alien, that I flinched. It was like touching a stranger. I stood up and looked in the full-length mirror on the back of the door. The shaved legs, the leggings, the V-neck shirt. The picture was becoming more cohesive, more real. A buzz from my phone broke the silence. It was the Gym Rats group chat again, a screenshot of a Tinder profile. The picture was of Jessica, taken from my brief, disastrous appearance at the door. Mike must have snapped it when I wasn't looking. The bio read Jessica, 24, Jake's cousin from Ohio, in town for a good time, not a long time, likes wings, guys who lift, and bad boys. My stomach lurched. They had made me a Tinder profile. As a joke. A new message from Mike popped up. Dude, your cousin is a hit. Got like 50 matches in 10 minutes. We're setting her up on a date with that roid rage guy from Gold's Gym. You know, the one who grunts like a wild boar. They were laughing, joking, turning my horrifying existential crisis into a gag. The old Jake would have laughed, too. He would have piled on, suggested even more ridiculous dates. But the person staring at the phone wasn't the old Jake. I walked out of the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, the one that had started this whole nightmare. I looked at the reflection, at Jessica. The hair was still a bit of a mess, but I could see it had natural waves, the hazel eyes, no longer wide with pure terror, now held a kind of weary sadness, like the body, which I had initially seen as a grotesque prison, was, well, it was objectively beautiful, the curves were elegant, the lines were soft. For the first time, a thought flickered through my brain, unbidden and deeply confusing. I'm kind of pretty. The thought was so jarring, it felt like a betrayal of my old self. But I couldn't deny it. Stripped of the panic and the clown makeup, the woman in the mirror was attractive. And for a split second, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't horror or disgust. It was a strange, unsettling flutter of pride. Then the weight of the situation crashed back down on me. I was pretty, yes. And I was also a joke to my friends. I was a target for strangers on the street. I was trapped, with no end in sight. I traced the unfamiliar curve of my hip with a shaking hand. What is the lesson? I whispered to the reflection. What the hell am I supposed to be learning from this? The woman in the mirror just stared back, her sad hazel eyes offering no answers at all. The next couple of days were a blur of awkward survival. I developed a routine born of paranoia and necessity. I learned to sleep on my back to avoid squashing my new chest. I learned that bras with no underwire existed, and they were a gift from the heavens. I learned that putting long hair into a simple ponytail required a level of dexterity I did not possess, resulting in a lumpy, crooked mess that I just decided to call bohemian chic. I spent most of my time locked in my apartment, subsisting on the groceries I'd bought and venturing out only when absolutely necessary. The Gym Rats chat was a constant source of psychological torment. They had fully committed to the Jessica bit. Ryan. Hey, Jess. Jake left his controller here, so does he prefer inverted or standard y-axis controls? Mike. Forget that. Jessica Chad from the gym wants to know if you're free Friday. He wants to take you rock climbing, says he'd love to spot you. I'd reply with bland, non-committal answers, my fingers typing out, haha, so funny, while my brain screamed obscenities. The lie was getting heavier each day. Orion's questions were the worst. They were always specific. Casual little tests designed to trip me up. What was the name of Jake's dog when he was a kid? What's the scar on his knee from, I'd have to invent plausible but vague answers, feeling his suspicion radiating through the phone screen. The lesson from the cryptic email haunted me. Walk a mile in her shoes. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the fight we'd had. She'd accused me of not listening, of not being present, of prioritizing my bro time over our relationship. At the time, and I'd dismissed it as her being needy. Now I wasn't so sure on living in this body. I was starting to see the world through a different lens. A lens of vulnerability, of being constantly observed and judged. It was exhausting. The climax came on a Thursday afternoon. I was attempting to do some of my old bodyweight exercises. Push-ups were different. My arms felt weaker, and my chest got in the way. It was pathetic. I was in the middle of a very wobbly plank when there was a knock on the door. Not the loud, impatient banging of Mike, but a quieter, more deliberate rap. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Ryan. He was alone. Panic set in. I couldn't pretend I wasn't home. My lights were on. I took a second to smooth my lumpy ponytail and pull on one of Sarah's oversized sweaters. It felt safer, like armor. I opened the door. "Ryan, hi? What's up?" I chirped. The Jessica voice, now a practiced, if still unconvincing, performance. He didn't smile. He just looked at me. His expression serious. "Hey, Jessica, can I come in for a sec? I think I left my wallet here the other day." It was an obvious lie. He'd driven away with Mike. But I couldn't call him on it. "Oh, sure, of course." I stepped back and let him in. He walked into the middle of my living room, but he didn't look for a wallet. Instead, his eyes scanned the apartment. It was neater than usual. I'd been stress cleaning, but it was still undeniably Jake Carter's apartment. A poster for the Terminator was on the wall. A stack of video games sat by the TV. A single. Lonely Dumbbell was holding a door open. "So," began, turning to face me, his arms crossed. "How are you liking the city?" "It's nice," I said, my hands fidgeting with the hem of my sweater. "Different from Ohio." "I bet," he said. He took a step closer. "You know, it's funny. You look a lot like him. Around the eyes." "Genetics, I guess," I squeaked. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting past me, towards my open closet door. I'd left it ajar after my failed attempt at exercise, draped over a chair inside, just barely visible. Was my favorite hoodie. It was a faded, gray zip-up with a small tear on the cuff. It was my comfort object, the thing I wore when I was sick or just bumming around the house. It was unequivocally mine. Ryan had tried to borrow it once, and I'd almost tackled him. His eyes locked onto it. I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Recognition. Confirmation. The final puzzle piece clicking into place. He looked back at me. His voice was quiet, dangerously calm. "That's Jake's favorite hoodie," he said. Not as a question, but as a statement. The one he never, ever lets anyone touch, not even me. I opened my mouth to form a denial, to invent another lie, but no words came out. My throat was tight, my mind was blank, then the whole elaborate, stupid lie had just crumbled to dust. I had been so focused on my face, my body, my voice that I'd been caught by a simple piece of clothing. Ryan took another step forward, his eyes searching mine. He wasn't looking at Jessica anymore. He was looking for his friend. His voice was barely a whisper. "It's you, isn't it?" My carefully constructed dam of composure broke. The effort of the last few days, the fear, the confusion, the humiliation, all of it came rushing to the surface. My shoulders slumped. The fake, high-pitched voice vanished. A ragged, broken sound escaped my lips. "Yeah," I choked out. My real voice, raspy from disuse, finally returning. "It's me." The tears I had been holding back for days finally fell. They streamed down my new, smooth cheeks, hot and shameful. And I have no idea how to fix this. I expected him to laugh, to recoil in shock or disgust, to run out of the apartment screaming, "He was my bro, my dude. We didn't do this. We didn't do crying. We didn't do supernatural gender-bending crises." But he didn't do any of those things. Instead, Ryan closed the distance between us in 2 quick strides. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm and grounding. He wasn't looking at my body. He was looking straight into my eyes. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt like someone was actually seeing me, Jake. "Then we figure it out," he said. His voice fierce with a loyalty that hit me harder than any punch ever could. Together. The word hung in the air between us, a lifeline thrown into the chaotic sea of my existence. Together. He didn't ask how. He didn't ask why. He just accepted the impossible reality I had presented and immediately put himself on my side. I completely broke down. A sob tore through me, a raw, ugly sound of pure relief. I sagged against him, and he held me up, his hands steady on my shoulders. I told him everything. The waking up, the mirror, the terrifying void, the bra, the guys at the door, the cat calling, the shaving, the Tinder prank, and finally, the email, the bro code violation. He listened to it all without a single hint of judgment. He just stood there, a solid, unshakable presence in my swirling vortex of insanity. When I mentioned ditching the Lord of the Rings marathon for Sarah, he just nodded. "I remember that night," he said quietly. "I was pissed. Mike was just bummed. We figured she was giving you a hard time." He shook his head. "I never thought this." He gestured vaguely at my body. "I was an idiot," I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. She was right. I was a terrible boyfriend. And a terrible friend. "You were a dumbass," he corrected, a hint of the old Ryan shining through. "But you're not a terrible friend." He squeezed my shoulder. "Okay, so the email said, 'Until the lesson is understood.' What's the lesson?" "I don't know," I said in exasperation. "That life sucks for women, that I should have watched a movie with you guys. I get it. I swear to God, I get it. Lesson learned. Can I please have my penis back now?" Ryan actually cracked a smile. "All right, let's calm down. Freaking out won't help." He led me over to the couch and sat me down. "We just have to think. If this is some kind of cosmic karma thing, then you have to do something to prove you've learned. An apology isn't enough. It has to be an action." We spent the next few hours brainstorming. It was the most surreal conversation of my life. Ryan, my beer-drinking, video game-playing best friend, was earnestly helping me figure out how to undo a magical gender swap curse. He suggested I volunteer at a women's shelter. I told him showing up as Jessica and trying to explain my situation would probably get me arrested. He suggested I send Mike a long, heartfelt text about the objectification of women. We both agreed Mike would just think Jessica was being weird and deep. The truth was, the lesson wasn't just about my friends. It was about Sarah. I'd ditched them for her, and in doing so, I'd failed them both. My whole relationship with Sarah had been tainted by that casual selfishness. I never truly listened to her. I never tried to understand her perspective. I just expected her to fit into the empty spaces of my life. "I need to talk to her," I said finally. "I need to apologize. Not as Jake trying to get her back, but just to say I'm sorry for being a selfish jerk." Ryan nodded. "Okay, that's a start, but you can't exactly call her like this." He was right. The thought of trying to explain this to Sarah was even more horrifying than explaining it to Ryan. Exhaustion finally caught up with me. The emotional breakdown had left me completely drained. Ryan must have seen it on my face. "Get some sleep, man," he said, his voice soft. "We'll figure this out in the morning. I'm not going anywhere." He took the blanket from the back of the couch and tossed it to me. He then settled into my worn-out armchair, pulling out his phone and starting up a game. The simple, normal act of him just being there was the most comforting thing in the world. I curled up on the couch, wrapped in the blanket, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I fell asleep without fear. I woke up to the smell of coffee. My eyes fluttered open. The morning light was streaming through the blinds. My head felt clear. The pounding headache was gone. And something else was gone, too. The weight on my chest. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. I looked down. My old familiar, flat and muscular chest was back. My college t-shirt, the one that had been stretched to its limit, was hanging loosely on my frame. I looked at my hands. They were my hands again, calloused and capable. I scrambled to my feet, my legs sturdy and familiar, and ran to the mirror. Jake Carter stared back at me. Scruffy, square-jawed, tired-looking Jake Carter. I had never been so happy to see my own unimaginative face. I ran a hand through my short, dirty blonde hair. I let out a whoop of pure, unadulterated way. Then, just to be sure, my hand shot downward. Everything was back in its proper place. "Thank you, God," I whispered, leaning my forehead against the cool glass of the mirror. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees. You're welcome, I guess. I spun around. Ryan was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He had a small, tired smile on his face. He looked me up and down. Huh, he said, taking a sip from his mug. I gotta say, you were prettier as a girl. I laughed. A real deep laugh that felt amazing. Shut up, man. He handed me the other mug. The warmth spread through my hands. We stood there in silence for a moment, the morning sunlight cutting across the floor. So it's over, he said. Yeah, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. It's over. Did you learn your lesson? He asked, a hint of humor in his voice. I thought about it. I thought about the fear, the vulnerability, the frustration, the way the world looked and felt so different, the way my own friends had treated me, the sudden, shocking empathy I'd been forced to acquire. Yeah, I said, my voice serious now. I did. He nodded, accepting that, no more questions needed. He was just my friend, and I was back. That was all that mattered. Later that day, after Ryan had gone home to get some actual sleep, I sat on my couch, my phone in my hand. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name, Sarah. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I stopped. What would I even say? Hey, sorry I was a jerk. I was recently the victim of a karmic gender reassignment curse. No. I opened up my messages instead, my fingers, now feeling wonderfully familiar and clumsy on the small screen, started to type. It wasn't a long message. It wasn't an excuse. It was just the truth. Hey, Sarah, this is going to sound random, but I was thinking about us, about how things ended. You were right about a lot of things. I never really tried to see things from your side when I just wanted to say about what I said and did last year. I was an idiot, and I'm sorry. I hit send before I could second guess myself. I didn't know if she would reply. It didn't matter. The apology wasn't for her. Not really. It was for me. It was the final action, the proof that I had, in fact, walked that mile, and I would never, ever forget the view.